Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We have to go right into the breaking news, no time for formalities, because the United States has just levied a strike in the Iranian side of things. You say, Tony, that's been going on for a while. What's the deal? Well, the United States is focusing on a couple of strategic points in Iran along the Strait of Hormuz. The only deep water port outside the Strait of Hormuz in Chabahar, that's in southern Iran. The United States began the day with a series of early morning strikes. Why does that matter? We haven't really been doing those up until this point. It would be the nighttime, and then the daytime would come, and it would be a little bit of peace and some tense moments. And then the nighttime would come, or the afternoon for us, and Central Command would begin another series of strikes. But that's not the case. Because last night, after I got done doing the show, I was treated to another series of strikes by the United States, and these a little bit closer to Kharg Island. So all the way up the Strait of Hormuz and then down toward, again, the actual Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf beyond the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of activity. Why? Because the United States is getting closer to taking Kharg Island and likely several other islands in the meantime. So let's dig in. What's actually happening? As of right now, 7:07 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, July 15th in the year of our Lord 2026, U.S. attacks are ongoing on Keshem Island, specifically regarding a tiny island off of Keshem Island called Hengram Island. There are no longer any power or water facilities that are active and aware to the noticed by the United States on Keshem Island proper. There were suspected to be one last power facility of some sort on Hengram Island. That is now no longer a thing. So the United States is carrying out more detailed strikes. Additionally, U.S. officials told both Reuters and the Wall Street Journal, again, these are unnamed reporters, so take this with a slightly smaller grain of concern. Quote, the recent strikes against Iran are aimed at destroying military capabilities. You say, yeah, I knew that. Before more complex operations are carried out. Quote, Trump is leaning towards expanding operations in Iran days after receiving briefings from his top advisors. Options are being considered, including intensifying airstrikes and sending ground forces to seize Iranian islands near the Strait of Hormuz. Trump chaired a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the possibility of controlling the Kharg Island. Trump is hesitant to use ground forces in attacks against Iran. Now, the official quoting there to Reuters and the Wall Street Journal encompasses that entire phrase. So including the statement from the U.S. official to these two outlets, in which he reportedly chaired a meeting on Tuesday, that being yesterday, discussing the possibility of controlling Kharg Island. The concern, by the way, and why Trump hasn't done it yet, is that by taking an island from the Iranians, it will almost certainly result in the loss of life for some U.S. troops. Now, small compared to every other military conflict by the United States in history. However, the President of the United States does not want to see U.S. troops dead. He doesn't. And so he weighs some of these things very, very heavily. Now, additionally, the ability of Iran to launch rocket strikes and drone strikes, perhaps, at targets like, for example, Keshem Island or Kharg Island or other Iranian islands along the Strait of Hormuz means that, yes, maybe the United States could take it, but then if Iran decides to blow up their oil infrastructure anyway so the United States can't have it, would the United States be able to stop it? That's some of the subject in currently what's going on. Now, some of the strikes that are ongoing are resulting in some very, very large fires, which means that the United States is hitting two kinds of things. Number one, the United States is hitting some kinds of power infrastructure right along the timeline. The President of the United States said earlier this week that the United States was going to begin hitting power infrastructure. A lot of these fires are also estimated to be any of the last IRGC, that be the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, storage facilities and whatnot in the meantime. So that brings us over to some footage that I was a little surprised to see. I don't think I can share on air exactly why I was surprised to see it. The Central Command of the United States released a statement today from Tampa, Florida this afternoon at 4:53 p.m. saying, quote, U.S. forces enforced naval blockade measures against Iran July 15th by disabling an unladen oil tanker attempting to sail toward an Iranian port in the Arabian Gulf. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, forces observed a Curacao-flagged vessel, the MT Belma, transiting international waters toward Kharg Island. The commercial vessel ignored multiple warnings as it attempted to violate the U.S. blockade. Now, we'll get to, Curacao and why that matters here in a couple of minutes, because this particular island, you say, I've never heard of this nation before in my entire life. There's a little something to this. So excuse me, Curacao, not Curacao. The K should have been a C there in the notes. Hold on. Now, Curacao is a little bit of an interesting island in this particular instance because it is a very, very, very teeny tiny island that is right off the coast of Venezuela. Which means what? For a long time, it's been suspected of being part of the Belt and Road Initiative and kind of shell company front groups for China and for Russia and for Iran and for Cuba and for Venezuela. These little pocket microstates, which have operated and said, I am an independent freighter. Please do not come on board and ask what language the sailors on this vessel speak. And so the Curacao flagged vessel, the Belma, tried to approach Kharg Island. And then the CENTCOM statement says a U.S. aircraft disabled the vessel after firing Hellfire missiles into the ship's smokestack, which is not the easiest shot to hit. But anyway, I think we actually have the footage of this ready to go here. Yes, you can see the stability of the aircraft. This is an MQ-9 Reaper drone. That's what the camera looks like when you have a drone in the air. And you can almost hear tally, splash, hit, and then racks up another one. There's just something about seeing the MQ-9 Reaper go to work that just warms my dear Midwestern Hoosier and very American heart. So again, this Dutch Caribbean island, Curacao, it's presumed to be owned and heavily influenced by the Chinese Belt and Road initiatives. Again, it should also be mentioned here that one of the reasons that Dutch diplomats are very angry about Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosting this 60-nation task force against Chinese-backed Antifa foreign nationals operating in the United States, and then also U.S. citizens acting on behalf of Antifa in the United States and around the world. The Dutch are a little concerned because some of their holdings just so happen to be closely allied with China, former Venezuelan regime, Cuba, etc. So that brings us over to some of the current statements by the President of the United States and what's actually going to happen. So the President of the United States was with the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, in Pennsylvania for a large defense summit. And we got a little bit of insight, again, into where the United States is actually going.
And it wasn't other presidents didn't do what was right. They should have done it a long time ago. It would have been much easier. And they want to settle so badly. They don't like what we're doing.
So the President of the United States gets up in front of the country and says, I recognize that the current military action in Iran and around Iran is unpopular. He says, I recognize this. He said, I'm not here to do this because it's going to win or lose the midterms. I'm doing this because it is what's right. And there were a lot of people on the right who suggested, many of for example, a lot of great friends of mine over at the Federalist, over at the Daily Caller, said, hang on a second here. The President of the United States, I would much rather the United States also encourage ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, to do a ton of deportations, to do a ton of traffic stops, though they be unpopular and lose the midterms, if we're going to say that we're willing to bomb Iran and lose the midterms, is the argument. And then the president ended up, like 5 minutes later, saying, also, ICE, you're going to start doing all the traffic stops again. We'll get to that. I don't mean to go out of order here. But the President of the United States begins by saying, I'm doing this because I've lost my patience, because I believe that this is right, and I'm tired of doing this every single week. You can hear it in his voice. The man's exhausted with this nonsense. And a lot of that depends upon who the president is around and where these things are going. Now, it should also be noted here that the president says, and kind of follows up by pointing out that Iran, he said, they want to reach some kind of a deal. Now they're begging us, and we do have confirmation through individuals watching diplomatic cables, a lot of communication between the Iranians and Qatar, and which Qatar has floated to the United States through intermediaries. Hey, Iran wants to talk again, and I promise this time it's totally going to be different. Yeah, I don't think that's really going to work. The only major proponent of this went on a podcast today with Joe Rogan. The other individuals who are against going to the table and talking about nothing again are with President Trump or in Washington, D.C. itself. Radio crew, we're going to send you to the commercial while we dive into more of these breaking updates on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Sorry to keep us rushing, but there's a lot more news to get to and not enough time to dig into it. By the way, if you like the show, liking and subscribing helps us out a ton as we go through this breaking news. So the president, not really sold on settling. We'll see what happens.
So badly, they don't like what we're doing, and they do want to settle. We'll find out whether or not we settle with them or we just finish it off. But I want to thank Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. He's been amazing. Pete, thank you very much. Great job.
So a lot of applause. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has not been doing, again, for America's 250th, you would expect that former Fox News host and celebrated author, and not to mention a decorated veteran himself, Pete Hegseth, would have been doing all of these videos about America's 250th. We saw some from Rubio, we saw some from Trump, we saw some from all over the place. So where has Hegseth been? Hegseth has been with Admiral Bradley Cooper, trying to put all of his time and attention to organizing not only the United States in the Middle East, but also the United States against China in the Southeast Asian Pacific. Now, of course, Secretary Hegseth, once in this particular kind of military manufacturing conference in Pennsylvania, Indiana and Pennsylvania are the two linchpins for military manufacturing in the United States, more so than Detroit, more so than Ohio. Indiana and Pennsylvania are like the sister state and commonwealth for producing the goods that blow up countries who haven't been to the moon.
A different department, a different moment, and thank God we have a different president who rebuilt the military once. He's doing it again and is willing to make a historic investment, $1.5 trillion investment in the War Department to ensure that we outcompete, without question, every other nation on planet Earth, so that things like Venezuela can continue to be done to reestablish deterrence around the world. But that next midnight hammer that's required 10, 20 years down the road is
that next midnight hammer. Meaning this, the new policy of the United States is that if you are doing something that is considered a threat to the United States, whether that is, again, as we saw last June, whether that is, as we might see with Pickaxe Mountain, again, the Isfahan nuclear facility bunker, that is just a small distance away, I think about 15 kilometers away, or again, for those of you who are from a country that's been to the moon, about 8.5, 9-ish miles away from Natanz, specifically, not Isfahan, excuse me. So the United States might be doing this again, or in the future, if there is a Chinese threat, if there is a Russian threat, if there is an Egyptian threat, if there is a threat in Luxembourg, the United States will rev up the B-2s because we can. That's the policy of the United States. It's very Teddy Rooseveltian.
Is because of the F-47 and the B-21 and the autonomy and the carriers that this president will build because of this historic investment. The Golden Dome that protects our country, the AI that allows us to target faster. This investment will fundamentally change the battlefield, keep the American people safe now and into the future, and it would not happen with Donald Trump. Mr. President, thank you very much.
All right, so what's the Iranian response to this? We'll talk about that because right now we do have some updates from the Middle East. Bahrain and Kuwait are both under attack. This is yet another night, I believe the fourth night in a row, that we have not only seen the United States carrying on subsequent and consistent strikes, we have also seen the Iranians begin retaliating or attempting to retaliate before the attacks even finished by the United States. Now that's considered dangerous because then the United States, with craft in the air, actively flying sorties, they can see you. And we do have a couple of retaliatory shots. I'm not sure any that have been reported very directly and specifically. And if maybe I wasn't supposed to say that yet, I believe the right word is oops. So that brings us over to what Iran has got prepared for this. I will say one other thing on the media side. They are trying to suggest, while Iran is loading all of these drones and missiles back into the air, that this is going to bring about the doom of the United States in the Middle East. Well, yeah,
Nope.
I'm afraid not. Radio crew, welcome back from your commercial break. The Iranians, since you went away, have started launching a bunch of missiles at Kuwait and Bahrain, the UAE, possibly Saudi Arabia. They're throwing missiles anywhere and everywhere, and most likely Iraq if they haven't done so yet. And the reason they are doing so is because they are trying to throw anything and everything that they can out. So Russian state media is out trying to suggest Iran vows to bomb American bases until ultimate victory after the deal has been shattered. Whoa. Drone after drone streaks through the night skies in a fiery seventh wave. And of these streak after drone, like one of them hit. And by one of them hit, I mean one of these drones hit, you guessed it, survey says, an empty warehouse. Here you go. There it goes. Boom, hits an empty warehouse in Kuwait. By the way, that lovely little fireball right there, that's from the last of the explosives of the Shaheed, the Shaheed 136 suicide drone. It didn't even penetrate the roof of the factory, boys, girls, and squirrels, or the warehouse in this case, excuse me. So empty warehouse, it doesn't even break through the roof of the warehouse and sends the remainder of its explosives into the air, which all ignite, oxidize, nice little fireball, and then, you guessed it, nothing. Incredible. I mean, wow, exciting. So what are we doing? Well, maybe the Patriot systems have something to say about this, because Iran was, this morning and yesterday, throwing a couple of drones and ballistic missiles over Iraq. Patriot systems and batteries are activated, intercepting drone after drone after drone. Again, drones do not fly as fast as ballistic missiles. So what's Iran's big plan to approach this? Well, they've got two plans. Number one, the foreign minister spokesperson said about 13 minutes after Trump said, you know, I'm kind of not in the mood to talk things over. They want a deal, but they can kind of piss off. The foreign ministry spokesman said, quote, the country has no plans to return to negotiations with the U.S. as long as Washington violates its commitments under the MOU. Oh, that's sweet. You guys still think that anyone is buying any of this MOU nonsense at this point? No, it's over. It's done. It's not happening. And by the way, the newest approach to impress everyone is that they've got this super cool new ultra Kamikaze super drone. That's right. The newest Iranian drone has been unveiled. It's making some of the rounds on social media. It is a very, very small, flat, kind of a gray drone. Supposedly, according to the Aerospace Drone Command, has called these new suicide drones small but effective. And the attack that they used on this Kuwaiti strike, now by the way, that the Kuwaiti strike did not do all that it was supposed to do, but apparently was dedicated to Najam Abdullah Khalahid, an Iraqi the IRGC claims was recently assassinated by the Kuwaiti government. I, nor you, nor anyone knows or cares who that is. But it's exciting. Now here's the rough part, and I'm gonna break your heart. These little drones right here, these could not even lift an eighth of the explosives in a very standard brick of C4. Not even 12 ounces of explosives are flying on this thing. Not if they're also going to be remotely controlled and electronically detonated. So essentially what you have here is a slightly heavier paper airplane that might maybe carry like possibly a World War II Japanese grenades worth of explosives. Maybe on a good day. I've seen rednecks with Tannerite and 2 Coors Lights rig an RC plane to do better than this. And they're all signing it. They're so excited. Oh, it's like, oh, it's going to destroy everyone. Incredible. Best of luck to you. Again, exciting. I can hear Lockheed and Northrop Grumman laughing in the distance. Even the Russians aren't using this. Even the Ukrainians aren't using this. They don't work. We don't have the tech and the batteries and everything else to propel a craft like that with sufficient speed over a long distance. Because you got to put the fuel, whether it's a very heavy battery or something, someone's got to spin that propeller. It isn't just your grandmother's collection of old sewing rubber bands to hold the yarn in place. Okay, I'm afraid not. As a former science teacher, I'm going to give that one a big fat. So, best of luck to him. Now, on the bright side, there is a whole lot of speculation and aggravation and yelling from like the Democrat side of the media, because there was a lot of stuff going on Capitol Hill today. You had a major hearing on fraud investigations, because there has been, true to the Department of Government Efficiency and also independent journalism, there have been billions of dollars upon billions of dollars in foreign wire fraud, in local wire fraud, in embezzlements, in corruption, in bribery. Shout out to the former mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, that was Bernie's pick. Then you've got the mortgage fraud. You've got the Medicare and the Medicaid fraud. You have the housing grant fraud. You have the education grant fraud, both autism and early childhood education grant fraud. All of that was investigated today, but a lot of senators were not there. Why? And I'm not joking. I'm not trying to cherry pick my way around this here. The majority of the Democrat senators today were just trying to get TV time. Here's Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire doing her best to sound real tough.
What is their proposal?
Excuse me. No, not JD Vance. Nice try. I meant Jeanne Shaheen, because Vance also had something to kind of say on some of this stuff as well. Do we have the Jeanne Shaheen over on the network side? We might have to go pull that particular clip up. Well, either way, that's fine with me. Let's actually pull up the Vance clip here where he talks about kind of the United States approach and what he expects the United States to do. He's been pulled away from the Middle East. I do actually want to get his clip before we kind of leave it away.
What is their proposal? The people that think you shouldn't negotiate with Iran.
I think that their proposal is to bomb and bomb and bomb. And the honest view, Joe, is that they do not actually have a solution. If you actually ask them, what do you want us to do? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? You know, they'll say things like, well, just bomb them to oblivion. Okay, we can do that. We can drop a lot of bombs. But what does that accomplish if there's still a crazy person who's still unwilling to shoot a few drones at the Strait of Hormuz?
So the criticism by the vice president in this particular instance is that, look, the people who are advocating for the diplomatic option to be kind of cast to the side, they just say they want to bomb things forever. Now, I will say that his frame afterward, where he says you can't just simply bomb and bomb and bomb, as long as there are a few individuals who are willing to throw things at the Strait of Hormuz will never be safe. That is true. That's true. He's not wrong there. The issue is that there is, in fact, an end goal to the bombing campaign. The ending goal is to create enough instability in the regime to, again, allow certain things to crumble in the regime so the country falls apart and the people take over. And that's a difficult thing. We don't actually know if that can be accomplished via an air campaign. We don't know how much blood and treasure is required to effectuate an end to an enemy of the United States for the last 47, 48 years. Now, again, Vance comes from a far more isolationist school than I am. It's one of the reasons why he's been retasked to come back to the United States and do fraud work instead of being insulted and disrespected by the Qataris and the Iranians and the Turks, etc.
What the president has done, I think very, very capably, is said, we're going to use military force in this situation when it's connected to something we're trying to achieve. So if you shoot at ships, we're going to shoot at the facilities at which you used to shoot at the ships. But we're not just going to do something open-ended indefinitely. We're not just going to bomb and bomb and bomb. We're going to try to use our military force as one of the many tools that we have to solve the problem.
So the fun thing is here, and this is where I will disagree with the vice president, that's not what's going on anymore. That's not what's going on anymore. That's what we were doing between kind of the announcement of the ceasefire and about a week leading up to it and when the MOU was tossed out finally. That entire, am I going to bomb them? Are you ready for a deal now? Are you ready for a deal? We're going to proportionally respond. Like, you hit one of our ships and we will launch at 2 coastal radar facilities in what we suspect is a SAM site. We did that. And you know what? Didn't work. And so that's no longer the strategy. Trump's current response, by the way, and I know the radio crew needs to go, but I want to make sure that I get this clip played. The president of the United States told a Fox reporter today that it may just be like ISIS. He may just go until he wipes them the hell out.
RGC. Does that mean that you might wipe them out like you did ISIS?
Yeah, it does. We will see what's happening. We received a call just as I was coming here. They want to meet. They always want to meet. But, this should have been done by other presidents for many years, for 47 years, but really a lot longer than that, and it wasn't. And I never understood why, but now I do.
All right, radio crew, head over to your commercial break. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll see that audio-only crew back in a second. All right, while they're away, the president of the United States keeps bringing up all these other presidents are unwilling to do what I have been willing to do. What does that mean? President Trump has a knack and a grudge. So in this instance, the knack means that the president of the United States knows things that need to be done that other presidents may not have been as willing to get done. And so in this particular instance, the president of the United States is making it very clear other presidents have been unwilling to take the political hit necessary and temporarily to get the job done. During the Gulf War, George H.W. Bush, very unpopular. During Grenada, Reagan, very unpopular. During some of the negotiations with the USSR, Reagan's popularity dipped down. But after the United States wins, after it beats, after it succeeds, after victory is sounded, after, the eagle cries, then the Americans find that to be a more popular approach.
Because if you're not going to do it the way I'm doing it, you're never going to make a deal with them. They were very difficult. They're good negotiators. They were tapping everybody along for 47 years. Then Obama came in and he just offered them, a fortune of money. He paid.
So then he starts kind of talking about the Obama crew and administration. Now, Vance does say, again, whenever you hear Trump ask the question about the Iranians and what it is that he's willing to do, are you going to take Kharg? Are you not going to take Kharg? What does Trump always respond? I can't tell you that. And I'm not going to tell you whether or not I'm willing to put 800,000 American troops in Tehran, or whether we're just going to fire, another couple of missiles, light off some Roman candles from the UAE and call it a day. He is very, very ambiguous about where and what he is willing to do. Why? Well, first of all, it's a negotiating tactic. You do not tell the other side your bottom line. Joe Biden and Barack Obama, that was their style. They would say, don't. And then Kamala Harris, don't. And then Barack Obama would say, they need basketball in Syria. And also, screw that wedding in particular. So like the president of the United States, in the current context, making it clear, I'm not making it clear, that's a different approach. Vance doesn't necessarily have that. And so you can say this is Vance communicating to the populace on behalf of the presidency. Again, Vance has a series of very acute skills. And I think there's a reason he was kind of brought off of the foreign policy circuit. Here's kind of the last bit of Vance with Joe Rogan earlier today.
It's
not
awful.
good.
It's
Yeah.
not good, right? And so, like, if the Iranian people want to rise up and change their government, that's up to them. But we're not going to send 150,000 ground troops in order to accomplish a change in a regime unless the people on the ground themselves want to accomplish that outcome.
Now, the president of the United States has a different story on this. He says they don't have the guns. He said this repeatedly, time and time again. We've even let it slip from the federal government side of things, from our military, that the Kurds were supposed to pass along some guns. And they didn't do that very well, which is really strange because you would think that the U.S. is like really, really, really good at gun running by now. I mean, God knows how many Toyota Hiluxes are currently over in the Middle East instead of in my driveway where they should be. Toyota, hit me up with it. Come on. The chicken tax is over. Give me a Toyota Hilux. Come on, for me. Anyway, so the vice president here is saying, well, here's what we're not going to do. And also the Iranian people have to step up. Again, I don't disagree with him on like the framing of it. It's just a little bit of a strange thing to focus on. But that was really all that was there. There was a little bit of some questions here about J.D. Vance and the Israelis trying to tank negotiations. And I don't really think that's as prescient to the particular news cycle because there were some serious fraud hearings today. You had Blanche doing some fist fighting. And then, of course, the posturing came out to play. And boy, did it ever. I mean, I told you Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire had made the decision to do some weird things. Radio crew, welcome back from your commercial break. So again, where are all the Democrats today? Well, they were doing their media appearances.
Does any part of you think that this might actually be necessary, some level of ground troops to gain advantage over Iran in this war to get back to a negotiated settlement?
This war is overwhelmingly unpopular with the American people.
Every single war always is. Every single military operation always is until it's finished and the Americans see the results.
And I think putting troops on the ground in Iran or in Kharg Island or in the region in a way that's going to endanger more lives is not something that the American people will support. And I think the president needs to come up with a different strategy. Again, this is the problem because he's had no strategy for this war from the very beginning. It's been a failed effort, and he needs to figure out how to get them back to the negotiating table.
Okay. This is the problem with the Democratic Party. They truly believe that no matter how insane and radical an individual is, even if they say to your face, I want to kill you and I want to set your family on fire, they'll say, well, maybe they just, maybe there's like some socioeconomic reasons that if we could just alleviate, again, it's the Barack Obama, we just give them basketball in Syria, then they would suddenly turn into wonderful, amazing people. That's not the case. That is just not the case. Now, I mentioned some Democrat senators. Elisa Slotkin of Michigan is also getting out there and running the media circuit today. She's really, really angry at ICE. And I told you, again, pulling the left further into the DSA side is only going to hurt them. Now, there's some information on Cuba as well. We'll get to that in a second. But again, since I told you Democrats were doing the media gamut instead of attending committee meetings like they were supposed to today, here's more of the performative.
But ICE, as we understand it, their rules of engagement, their lack of training, and then frankly, just the obscene amount of resources they have, to me, just not pass muster. And it is just not what we need as a country right now.
Okay, so what we need as a country right now, again, there's just a lot of pearl clutching and anguish and yelling and screaming over just about everything that all follows the same thing. Resources are not being allocated correctly, and the rules of engagement are, not very, very good, I'd say. Now, in the meantime, there's a new thing to freak out about. I know, I too am excited. I'm thrilled whenever there's a new thing to freak out about. What is hitting the trending side is a report that senior defense officials are now looking at military options with Cuba. I know, truly. So according to the CBS article here from Washington, as the U.S.-Iran war restarts following the collapse of the weeks-long ceasefire in which there was no ceasing of firing, senior Pentagon officials are also quietly eyeing another flashpoint much closer to home, Cuba. Quote, military planners have in recent weeks examined a range of options for possible action against the island, including an Army-led air assault involving thousands of U.S. soldiers to be carried out by the 101st Airborne, the only unit trained for such a task, according to multiple U.S. officials with knowledge of the discussions. So what is this all actually about? Is this the United States getting ready to invade Cuba? Is it happening? Are we going to push in from Guantanamo and or from Guantanamo Bay, and we're going to drop in the 101st Airborne, and finally we're going to have tanks in Havana, and we're going to rescue all of those poor Chevys that have been stuck in that country for the last 70 years? No, that's not what's happening. The United States War Department has all of the military plans always to invade every single country at all times. Every one of them, including plans to invade Mexico and take over the government, including to invade Canada and take over the government, and including to invade France and burn everything down, God willing. The United States War Department, that's their job. There are so many butter bars that are pulled directly out of West Point and are thrown into the Pentagon, and they are told, tell me how you would conquer Luxembourg. And the reason the United States is drawing up fresh plans on what it would do to take down Cuba is because the entire government is changing. The entire country is changing. We are now seeing blackouts and brownouts every couple of minutes. You can set your watch by how often the resources fail, and the regime gets more and more and more nervous. And so the United States, when the intelligence changes, has to rewrite the plans, because where you choose to drop the guys on June 1st may be different from where you choose to drop the guys on August 1st. Things should be constantly updated. Now, again, this is what's interesting. When the Pentagon was asked about this, the State Department as well, by CBS, the officials said that essentially Hegseth is just keeping the plans up to date. And that the President of the United States is simply proud of particular of his officials. Acting Pentagon Press Secretary Joel Valdez said, we don't comment on hypothetical military operations. That's basically it. I'm really enjoying all of the left-wing accounts who are announcing the United States is about to conquer or liberate Cuba. Folks, relax, take a breather. Is the United States maybe about to dive into Cuba? I don't think that right now it appears the U.S. is planning on this kind of a military operation, A, before the midterms, and then B, while in the middle of dealing with the Middle East and Iran. I just don't see it. Also, the parliament, or the somewhat not really elected legislative body of Cuba, has already announced that they're going to try to relax some of the country's economic restrictions in its communist regime. I just don't see some of those things ending. That's usually a last option kind of a situation. Again, acting Attorney General Todd Blanche has been working on a series of charges for the Cuban regime, and not to mention putting to task a lot of espionage arrests here in the United States. And in the United States, meaning that Todd Blanche, unlike Pam Bondi, who got up in front of the Attorney General's lectern and would tell the entire country all about how she was so proud of President Trump and how they were going to go out and do the things, but then not really do a whole lot of things. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche steps up, and you start seeing a series of arrests across the United States in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and then the FBI capturing foreign espionage agents, either with the HM01 old number stations network, which is still active and trying to broadcast into the United States. Not really too good at it, though, and not really as active through the power outages. And then also the other espionage and influence operations, like Hassan Piker's partner that helped him organize that Neville Roy Singham Chinese Code Pink operation to blockade run military supplies to the Cuban regime under the auspices of saying, oh, we're just running food and medical supplies and some of Tim Walz's tampons to the Cuban people. So that brings us over to the big confirmation hearing with Blanche today. Now, there were two big hearings today. One was a hearing on fraud, which we're going to get to. And the other, since we're talking about Attorney General Todd Blanche, the other has to do with, taking on the entire Senate as acting Attorney General Todd Blanche did. And it had all of the classic fireworks that you would expect. And I mean, it's got everything. You turn on C-SPAN 3, ESPN 8, the Ocho. They've got live coverage of the fist fighting, where you've got like Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, who may, with help, learn to read one day, trying to announce that he's like super Hitler. And are you sure that when you got into law enforcement or into law or into whatever it is that you do, that you weren't like getting drunk and raping women left and right? Mazie Hirono.
Questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
Mr. Blanche, over the...
Now, I went and looked some of these things up to see if there were any kind of credible allegations or prior settlement information. There's nothing. The plan of attack for Democrat senators, unless they're out in front of the media saying everything is bad and resources aren't allocated correctly, again, without a plan of where they would allocate resources except universal health care, in other words, Canada's universal suicide system, then they're trying to suggest that anyone in front of them that exists is likely a rapist. I just, again, after the Graham Plattner problems, and after Zohran Mamdani has refused to get rid of Morris Katz, and after the Eric Swalwell stuff, I don't know if that's your best approach. Same with Cory Booker. Cory Booker tried the same weird routines today. I don't think it went very well.
Department ethics rules are very clear about avoiding the appearance of impropriety. In a case like this, I don't think that's appearance of impropriety. I think that's improper. That the connected and the powerful are getting a chance to rub shoulders. It would seem appropriate that you avoid those kind of appearances and dinners like that.
Every appearance or dinner or speech that I give are cleared by ethics officials.
So your attendance at that dinner was cleared by ethics officials?
Everything that I do.
I didn't ask you everything.
So the everything includes the everything. And by the way, if you are going to ask these questions, there are private conversations which are held before the hearing. And this was already covered in full. The senators of this committee know exactly what does and does not happen regarding the interviewed person that is in front of them for nomination and for confirmation. This isn't new. I mean, it's so bizarre to see that, such a waste of people's time. Radio crew will send you over to the commercial break. We're going to continue here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
thing you do was your appearance at that dinner.
You can ask the questions, but you cannot control my answers. I'm under oath, and I can answer the questions. I choose to answer them.
Were you
so what I will tell you is when I do
yes
things
or no? Were you approved
when
by
I do
ethics
things outside of the department, whether it's a speech, whether it's a dinner, whether it's an event, they are approved by ethics officials.
You did not answer whether that attendance was approved.
Again, he's already made it perfectly clear. Yes, this and everything. All the time, 110%, absolutely, clearly. I'm bewildered. Now there are two others that I think are worth showing you here. So one is Cory Booker trying to go after Todd Blanche on Epstein victims, and so Cory Booker tries to suggest that Todd Blanche has refused to meet with the proposed victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And Blanche responds, well, I couldn't just meet with them by myself because they didn't have legal counsel present. And then when they did have legal counsel present, once they do, again, because I work for this administration, I then have to have an attorney for the administration present because that if I work for the DOJ, that's required. And it's not only required by regulations, it's required so that he doesn't enter into something that is going to violate a whole series of statutes. And Cory Booker's response is, oh no, that's not true. Yeah, it kind of is. It's written in black and white in the documents that are in front of you. Now, then Jasmine Crockett gets out in front of the entire committee and the entire world because she's not actually on any Senate committees. And she's still really bitter that she lost her primary down in Texas to James Tallarico. So she got up and said, we can't be confirming Todd Blanche.
The Senate must not confirm Todd Blanche. Listen, Todd Blanche specifically walked into the Senate today.
Okay.
And proudly said that he is the president's personal attorney.
Yes. The Attorney General of the United States is, in fact, the attorney that operates on behalf of the executive branch. That's why the president nominates the Attorney General. I mean, this is why, even though, and by the way, this glass is already shattered. It's already shattered. As soon as Eric Holder announced to the country that he was Barack Obama's wingman, forever and forever, amen. Whether the candidate is as pure as the driven snow or as evil as a Disney villain. That's what the function of the Attorney General is. But that's also not exactly, he didn't say I'm the president's personal attorney. He says I am the attorney for the United States and the executive branch.
When you become the U.S. attorney, when you walk into a courtroom, whether you are the U.S. attorney or if you are an assistant, you walk in and you either say the government is ready to proceed, or you say the people, or you say the United States. You don't say Donald Trump versus. And so therefore we need somebody that is going to stand.
But if the individual who is being sued is Donald Trump, then it is in fact Donald Trump versus. Guys, this is how this worked. So how you file the lawsuit is how the parties are read in the courtroom. You know who should know that? Jasmine Crockett, who's supposed to be an attorney. It is embarrassing. Guys, this is Matlock level stuff. This is Andy Griffith ordering a weenie outside the courtroom level basic. Come on now. But again, at least you had some Democrats who showed up to this particular hearing. Alas, radio crew, welcome back. Now we get to the big fraud hearing, because as you are aware, there have been more than enough cases of fraud. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one extra little final bonus here for the Blanche hearing. I did go through a lot of these hearing clips. Blanche is just a normal guy. He isn't very flamboyant. He's like, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do it. I'm not going to get out there and record commercials of me riding horseback. I'm just going to do what I've been told to do. And this really upset one person, John Cornyn of Texas.
There's a lot of questions about what's going to be said tomorrow night by the president when it comes to the 2020 election. It was mentioned in here today. Any idea what you might hear tomorrow, or anything that could change your mind about what happened in 2020?
So again, you have Cornyn here, who's being asked about the presidential address tomorrow evening, and speculation galore about what that's going to be. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have some information now. Cornyn takes us in a different direction.
I frankly am more concerned about the upcoming midterm elections than I am of what happened in 2020. Obviously election integrity is very important, but I personally don't see any point in relitigating an election that occurred 6 years ago. Waiting to hear what he says, but that's quite a bold assertion.
Sat through this today.
So he moves forward. By the end of the clip, it's like a 2-minute long clip. I'm not going to have time to push everyone through this before the radio crew has to cut out. John Cornyn makes the case that he's not really impressed by Blanche because of like prior election claims, something like that. I would like to remind you, each and every one here watching, that Cornyn had no problem voting to confirm Pam Bondi, who was, again, far more showboaty and less substance. As far as I've seen in Blanche's acting attorney general time, he's just done very basic attorney general stuff. I haven't seen him make really big, huge accusatory threats. I haven't seen him lambast huge groups of people. Haven't seen him do the commercial circuit. He's just prosecuted and made cases on behalf of the United States. Again, as far as Jasmine Crockett's allegation here, I do happen to see quite a few cases in which Blanche assigns those particular lawsuits as the United States versus as the prosecutor sees fit to prosecute. Just very strange stuff today. But again, I told you there was a big fraud hearing today, and this is, again, a little bizarre when you have a huge hearing brought before the Senate committee here, and just no Democrats whatsoever show up because they believe personally, well, you know, there's no fraud to be seen. Who cares? So first there's this video that was posted, I believe from James O'Keefe, that you only have half the number of individuals who are here in the room. And then it's just called out directly by the by the Republicans in the Senate, that after the only Democrat who showed up finished and then a Republican went, there's no Democrats to pivot back to.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, wouldn't a Democrat go next since the Republican just testified?
If there were a Democrat here, yes.
So there's no Democrats present at a hearing about fraud?
There doesn't appear to be a great deal of interest across the aisle.
So what was actually said in this particular hearing? Well, we went into some of the details on how individuals like Nick Shirley, like Luke Rosiak, like many of the other independent investigators around the country have actually dived through cases of fraud, not limited to, but including corruption on the international side, wire fraud to Somalia, to Egypt, to African and Asian countries, to IP theft toward China, Medicare hospice fraud, welfare fraud in Massachusetts, in Minnesota, in Ohio, in California, in Nevada, in Washington, and Oregon. All kinds of grant fraud, just end to end to end to end. And again, not even in just like the millions here and there. We're talking billions upon billions of fraud. And when asked about this, again, these are actual questions that should be answered in some kind of a committee hearing, because if we're going to put cameras in there, then some actual questions probably should be asked. Here's Nick Shirley answering a couple of these questions on how he identifies fraud over to Senator the Senate committee here.
Shirley, how are you identifying initially what you're actually finding? Like, what's the tip that you're saying, I think there may be fraud there? How are you identifying that?
Yeah, a lot of it's I go through these databases and look for the largest amount of funding, and then also looking for the anomalies that come. For instance, in New York City at these adult daycares, there were 7,899 patients enrolled into an adult daycare, and they received $12.9 million. And I go to that daycare, there's only one floor, and it'd be, quite frankly, impossible to enroll that many patients into that daycare.
Yeah.
Now, if I was a senator from New York, maybe I'd want to be there. I've talked about this on the show recently. You have all of these senators who are currently running for elections and will be running for elections 2 years from now, or the following 2 years on that 6-year rotation system. And they always say, I'm here to represent Arkansas, or the state of New York, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or the state of California, and so on. And they talk about how what people from Maine care about is that I'm an oyster farmer and that I may want to touch people who enter my house, as Graham Plattner once said. If there was allegations of fraud about my home state, I would want to be there to that committee. Even if I wasn't on that committee, the committee chair can make allowances for another senator to fill in if a member of that committee a member of that committee, like if it's a budget committee, now there would be an open spot, for example, because Lindsey Graham's younger sister is taking the position. If there was another Republican who in a budget committee hearing said, hey, can I take that spot? They would give that spot to the Republican. That if the committee chair agrees, and that's been a long-standing thing, that's not something special. I don't see either of the two senators from New York at this particular hearing. He's alleging hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud. Again, elder care, adult daycare centers with 7,200 people enrolled at a building that could maybe house half a Sonic.
So it's just going through the available public data on it.
Yes, and then also relying upon Americans. For instance, I learned about the Minnesota fraud from Minnesotans. I went there and they told me, hey, finally, you're here to make a video on the fraud. I said, well, what are you talking about? And they said, well, this fraud's happening, this fraud's happening. And so then after that, for 6 months, I looked for that information about the fraud.
That's great. All right, that's very helpful.
So there are the criticisms that come say, well, what has he actually found? I mean, he hasn't. I heard this after the Minnesota stuff. After he came out and said, look, there are these daycares. And they said, well, you just went to them when things were closed. And, you just went to this daycare when there was no one else around so that you could harass people here and there and everywhere. And then we had ladies, for example, like this one, who he talked to.
You're at Future Leaders Early Learning Center.
Who stole and later admitted to stealing $5 million before running off to London. Radio crew will catch you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. We have way more to cover on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This building received over $3 million. Hello, how are you? I would like to see if I could bring little Joey, my son, little Joey here. Is there paperwork, or can I check out the daycare?
And she says, no, and then won't let him in. Again, this lady ends up later being arrested and admitting to stealing $5 million from this exact stuff. So again, don't, oh, well, he's actually lying about how he's looking through these numbers. Guys, I'm kind of doing a lot of the looking through these numbers because I'm also a man of Freedom of Information Act requests and FOIAs. This is something that we've talked about, for example, with friend of the show over from the Daily Wire, Luke Rosiak, who, through his time investigating a lot of these particular matters, does the same type of database look-throughs at the Doge level, and then also not just in the agencies, but in a lot of the NGO-related grant measurements. Now, James O'Keefe also made some allegations. They weren't really based on the financial side of things as much as they were other instances of fraud, for example, voter fraud in California, in which there were instances of, for example, people saying that those on Skid Row, that homeless were being ballot harvested. Governor Newsom's office said that they were looking into some of those claims already before the federal government could look into them. And James O'Keefe has pointed out, no one from California has cared at all about any of this. They didn't send anyone to investigate this. They're lying. We haven't seen anyone show up to investigate these fraud claims.
So this is a completely nonpartisan, non-political issue. Mayor Karen Bass, the LADA, and the governor of California did not criticize me. They actually put statements out saying this is outrageous and needs to be exposed.
So what's happened since
the Department of Justice has indicted, but nobody in the state of California has yet arrested or prosecuted these people.
And what's Gavin Newsom done?
Put out a statement condemning the stuff that we exposed in the tape. That's it.
So doesn't he have investigation authority?
He does in the state of California.
Doesn't Karen Bass?
She does.
And is it against the law?
It is. It's a state crime, fraudulently putting someone else's name on the California ballot petition.
So there are obviously some issues here. Now, there is one other thing that I think is crucial. It's very, very important. And it's Nick Shirley describing that for investigative journalists, whether independent or with a corporate entity, whether you're the traditional Upton Sinclair for the Chicago Tribune kind of newspaper reporter, or, you're out there is a guy with a camera doing kind of a vlog sort of a thing. Either way, why aren't we finding more individuals who are willing to come out and describe corrupt practices happening on the inside of many of these institutions or these companies in general, or the landlords, for example, in the case of the Columbus, Ohio, large-scale Middle Eastern fraud rings? Well, Nick Shirley's got some answers on that to Bernie Moreno.
Everyone knew about the fraud, but everyone was too afraid to talk about the fraud because of what would happen to them.
And what do you mean what would happen to them? Is it impolite to say that somebody's defrauding the government because there's of some certain race or gender or national origin? Is that somehow racist to say you should not steal money from the federal government?
It's not racist, but politically it can be seen as racist. They may label you as Islamophobic or a racist, quite frankly.
Well, I think profiles in courage wouldn't be something that would be written about the current members of the Democrat Party for sure. And because, again, you think you would agree that they're just afraid of being labeled that way, and that fear drives them away from even attending a hearing like today?
Yeah, definitely. And it's very sad to see that they put that's their priorities, is to make sure that they're not labeled as a racist or Islamophobic for exposing fraud or for exposing what's happening inside a community.
Again, this can be rather concerning if you're an individual, as again, we saw Tim Walz go after the individuals in Minnesota. We saw the whistleblowers who were targeted in California. Again, an entire bill was attempted to be shoved through the California State Assembly, going after those who are acting as whistleblowers to perceived fraud. And by the way, what I always enjoy, and I keep an eye on, some of the comment section, because we like to engage with the community here. The argument that has been made against some of the fraud reporting here is that they are finding cases that are rare and insignificant. So, for example, regarding Skid Row and the allegations that were made over individuals ballot harvesting and going up to the homeless and saying, I will give you $5 and a bottle of water if you sign up to vote, and then we come back and we bring you a mail-in ballot and tell you how to fill in the mail-in ballot and then put it in the mailbox for you. Which, again, there are some questions on that, because individuals who just went ahead and signed and filled out the ballot for the homeless individual who was cracked out on whatever anyway. You may say, well, that's really rare. And I mean, come on, only happened like a couple of 100 times. That's not enough to swing the ballot. Who cares? Why make a big deal out of it? The standard for prosecuting crime is not whether or not it is rare. The standard for prosecuting crime is not whether or not it is significant. Believe it or not, a lady being sexually assaulted in New York City may not be significant to someone from Kansas. An individual who is sexually assaulting individuals, but once every 7 years, that may be a very rare occurrence. The manner of the crime and the existence of the crime decides whether we as a country, not as an honor-based culture, but as a trust-based culture, prosecute crime. And if there are state governments who choose not to prosecute crime, whether it's a Republican state who doesn't want to investigate the shell company commercial driver's license shipping companies because, well, they don't want, to be called bad things, or, well, maybe they're paying their taxes, and we don't want to upset this one like corporate office park that's getting so much rent money from them. Not investigating those things, that's a problem. That's corruption, because you're not prosecuting reported acts of crime. On the flip side, in the left-leaning states, on the blue states, if they do not target and prosecute exposed instances of either financial or government-funded, state-funded fraud, or voter fraud, then they are also not doing their job. I don't care if it's really, really rare. I don't care if it's really, really, and again, I'm looking at the responses to this. If we're going to get into the minutia, then again, investigations are a duty of the prosecuting officials. And if that bothers you, if that upsets you because of how it makes a particular party look, the American people are losing a lot of trust in a lot of state and federal institutions because of the cherry picking. And a lot of that trust has been lost, deservedly so. Now, speaking again of the system failing a lot of individuals, you may remember that there was an illegal immigrant who charged through a line of parked cars. And again, this series of individuals who was involved in this illegal immigrant plowing through a series of cars, killing 3 people. An illegal migrant, didn't really speak any English, was arrested. The judge, and of course it's a little blonde, girly, liberal judge, gave this particular individual, according to the New York Post reporting here, this young man, this Singh is his name, back in October 2025, looking at his phone while driving the semi, slammed into multiple vehicles on the freeway in Ontario, California. 2 of the 3 victims' bodies were burned so badly that authorities had a hard time identifying the corpses. Judge Shannon L. Faherty sentenced him to less than 5 years behind bars for killing them. That's a problem. And not investigating that. Oh, well, it's really, really rare. I mean, come on. I mean, isn't it more important how wonderful and diverse America is? That's not going to build anything anywhere in a term of institutional and societal trust among Americans, nor should it. Nor should it at all. So, leaving that aside for just a moment, I did want to mention what some of the folks over on the left side of the aisle are spending a lot of their time doing. That's right. There is, believe it or not, there's a little something special that they have. There is some fraud they're outraged over. I found it. None of the stuff that we've listed. And by the way, when I mention latest instances of fraud, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon yesterday, by the way, pointed out that there is a huge epidemic of people fraudulently filling out student loans to dead individuals or just fake bot style people that aren't even real.
I'm really proud of one of the things that we've done, and that is we've just really totally revamped the FAFSA program, which is the applications that students fill out, for student aid as they're going to college. But as like many things in the government, we found that there was a lot of fraud going on, that there were bots that were applying for these loans. There were ghost students. There were dead people who were getting these loans, et cetera. And so we really did enforce and tweak this entire system so that we have this real-time fraud identity now. And it's as simple as showing an ID, online to show who you are when you're applying for these loans. And last year, we kept $1 billion of fraud money from going out. And just in the first, 2 weeks of revamping this program this year, we've saved, about $60 million. So it's very effective. And I'm very pleased that we are going to be able to save taxpayers, billions of dollars with this identity program.
And again, one of the reasons that we're seeing such a significant rise in this, we talked about this with regard to cybercrime, when FBI Director Kash Patel made it perfectly clear to the American people that a huge series of arrests over the last year have encompassed thousands of people who are committing various cybercrime, theft, ransomware, but are also engaged in bot networks that are trying to get their hands on American dollars through grant programs or through federal loans they're just never going to pay back at all. That they're wire in some way out of the country, money laundering it along the way. You may remember from the movie Shawshank Redemption how the entire premise of the escape from prison rests in the forging of the identity of Randall Stevens, a guy who doesn't exist. And Morgan Freeman freaks out and says to Andy Dufresne, "You can't just make a person up." And that's essentially what people are doing to attempt to defraud the federal government, or just finding a dead person and revivifying their identification and saying, "Oh yes, I am a student. Please give me federal student loans that the federal government will back and will not check as much as a local or private financial institution." These kinds of fraud, even if they're rare and insignificant, do matter to many Americans. Now, again, I told you the left was freaking out about a particular case of fraud today. It's not any of this. Oh, no. The case of fraud the left are freaking out about is that, according to Ken Delanian of MS Now, don't miss this one from Carol Leonnig, Vance's security detail is fed up with hastily arranged personal and family travel requests. J.D. Vance was going to have the Secret Service take his young son to a golf lesson via helicopter. Oh no, my pearls. Per people familiar with the matter. This is ridiculous, one person with knowledge of the planned golf trip said in a message, and who aren't named. Pence and Harris never pulled anything like that. Okay, well, first and foremost, Pence and Harris aren't exactly walking around with young biological children. By the time that Vice President Mike Pence was in office as President Trump's first vice president, Charlotte was already out of the house. Like, I know, because I know Charlotte. She was already out of the house, okay? So she wasn't getting helicopter rides anywhere. And Kamala Harris' stepdaughter wasn't getting magical opportunities here and there. But if Vance wants to allow his 6-year-old or 8-year-old son to ride on a helicopter to like one golf lesson, I'm not going to cry about it. Oh no, a father allowing his son to ride in a helicopter? What's next? What's that? Taking his daughter to see ballet in a limo? Celebrating his wife's birthday? Oh no, the horror, the humanity. Oh man, this is the fraud. Forget all of the millions and billions of dollars of fraud were your tax dollars. But if the vice president, again, in the middle of receiving a record number of threats, not just on himself, but his wife and his kids, the open and consistent number of threats that maybe he, his son gets to ferry off to this particular thing via helicopter. I'm sorry. I'm just, if you're going to avoid covering all of the other stuff, the Media Research Center and Newsbusters, again, confirming all of the things that media outlets like MS Now, MSNBC's rebrand, have chosen not to cover over the last several months, but all of a sudden, J.D. Vance allowed his 6 or 8-year-old son to go on a helicopter ride. Oh no. Get the Supreme Court in my smelling salts. Yeah, I'm just not feeling it as much. Perhaps you can tell. So, as kind of a final close tonight, I did want to mention one thing on Abdul El Sayed. There's one last thing. I have some stuff to talk about with Joe Biden's new book. Kamala Harris may be trying to kind of weasel her way to winning South Carolina early to get the Democratic nomination, because the left is literally hemorrhaging black voters right now. Hemorrhaging. Like, the Democrats are losing them in droves. Abdul El Sayed, their pick over black Democrats. El Sayed, and by the way, when I say picked over black Democrats, I mean El Sayed is going around bad-mouthing Barack Obama, which you may say, who cares? Black Democrats really, really care how you talk about Barack Obama. And it's kind of funny to see. After immense pressure from primary opponent Representative Haley Stevens, this is the Chris Farley look-alike, and sound alike and act alike. Again, from her,
You'll be living in a van down by the river.
Oh, and also the not AI clip of Representative Haley Stevens. This is the opponent of Abdul El Sayed in Michigan.
I am going to be working on our behalf. I am going to be telling the stories on our behalf. And you better believe I'm going to be doing it with a little bit of joy, a little bit of enthusiasm, a little bit of energy, and a little bit of stick it to them. Because that's the Michigan way.
All right, so this really awful candidate, believe it or not, now up in the polls. And I don't just mean up in the polls like slightly and only in polls that favor Haley Stevens. She is up in the Data for Progress poll. That's a socialist kind of Bernie Sanders kind of poll that is pro El Sayed. 54%. He's barely up on her. And then in other polls that we're seeing here that are also leaning pro Sayed in the last week, you actually have Haley Stevens beating El Sayed in a couple of polls. There's a Morning Consult poll out, which shows that Stevens is up 3 points on El Sayed. That is a major warning, because he was up like several leagues worth of points just a couple of days ago. So what's happening? Well, a couple of things. So first and foremost, it turns out that Mr. Socialist Worker Man is, he's been kind of forced to release his taxes. And what is in those taxes? Yeah, that he's a billionaire, again, who doesn't actually work. He's like, oh, I'm a physician. He's never actually worked as a physician. He's just an academic like the rest of them. That's it. He's never done anything useful in any way, shape, or form. So Haley Stevens now decides it's the time for blood. Says, since Abdul refuses to show voters what's really in his tax return and personal finances, I have some questions. Abdul and his wife made $686,000 in 2025. It's $250,000 more than they made the year before. So he got richer as he ran for office. Who's putting that money in his pocket? I love it. I love it when Democrats start going after each other like this, because they earned it. Because after all of the young socialists went after anyone who wasn't pro-Islam and pro-open Marxism, they would go after all of the other candidates in the most vile ways that they can find. And it has truly upset Haley Stevens and her team to the point where now she's just willing to all right, you know what? You want to play? Roll the dice. I'm ready. So she says he reported $262,000 in capital gains, more than 4 times what the average Michigander earns in a year. Where did this profit come from? And the reason this is fun, the capital gains things, this means that he's a big stock market player. Remember all these like DSA, the Democratic Socialist candidates who want to ban the stock market? I'm going to say that again. The Bernie Sanders candidates who want to ban the stock market and investing all happen to have a ton of investments. Gee, I'm shocked. I can't believe it.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
I mean, just beautiful. Abdul reported nearly $300,000 in other income, but he won't tell voters what it was. Is it for paid speeches? Bogus health products he hawked on his podcasts? I loved it. So as you guys know, I'm like really wildly picky about sponsors here on the show. If you watch live, you don't get a bunch of them. You may get a sponsor read. And again, one of the reasons why I'm really, really proud of our sponsors over at the Alliance Defending Freedom. More on them here in a minute. This guy, as a physician, hawks a bunch of vitamins. I have a couple of rules, believe it or not, to the Daily Signal crew. As a former science teacher and a biology and anatomy and physiology teacher specifically, I do not like pushing vitamins or weight loss products and things on y'all, because if I don't actually know that it works, I'm worried about putting my reputation, not to mention my degrees, which can be revoked, on the line for pushing crap. Abdul El-Sayed is out here hawking everything. I mean, it's like, man, it's like a Tucker Carlson podcast over here with all of like the weird products that can cure every disease and fix your health and keep you away from the Jews, as El-Sayed is terrified of. Also, Haley Stevens raking him over the ground for sales of property. What kind of property? Where is it? What did he sell it for? Did his father-in-law buy it while he's also funding his personal super PAC? I love it. More. Jerry. And none of this matters anyway, because Mike Rogers, the Republican, is doing what every Republican in the House and the Senate should be doing right now. He is sitting back and he is enjoying a stovetop popped open bag of Jiffy Pop. I guess it's not really a bag. It's that, he opens the aluminum. What is like a pan of Jiffy Pop? What do you call one individual unit of Jiffy Pop? Republicans are enjoying. The Midwestern Republicans near Chicago, are enjoying the cheese and the caramel mix. You have the rest enjoying the kettle corn or the delicious from Popcorn, Indiana deliciousness of just sitting back and watching all of the internal dagger shivving and fighting and ear biting. I love it. And all of this is why you have a white woman losing it in a huge duke it out fight with Abdul El-Sayed. Now, white women don't really pull well with black Democrats, because anytime they try to talk to black people, I mean, you've seen all of the memes, you've seen all the videos. When you have them try to talk to black people, they go, now you're too stupid to know that. Kathy Hochul of New York, right? She's like, man, there are a lot of New York black kids who don't even know what a computer is. And all the black people were like, excuse me? That kind of a thing. So she's not polling well with the black Democrats. And then the Muslims and Socialist Party that's taken over the Democrats. And then Nancy Pelosi is just out there like what is it? Is it the movie Airplane? Where you've got the guy going, everything will be fine, and the building's blowing up behind him. Maybe a different one of those comedies. But hopefully you get the reference. The best one, though, El-Sayed is now really upset that people are pointing out that he's a foreigner and he believes in like Islamic ideas. And he's like, no, I'm not like a foreign like Islamic guy. I'm just as American as you. I'm as American as aptly PA. And pick up troops. I sure am. So he releases this video, this ad. It's funded by his campaign. My family's roots in mid-Michigan trace back to the early 1800s. I lived with my grandma and my grandpa during my time in Michigan, and they've always had my back. They mean the world. I'm honored to introduce them to you. So he's whipping out the family. Oh boy, here we go.
Where did Abdul El-Sayed come from?
Here.
We're his grandparents.
We helped raise him.
He became a doctor.
He always wanted to help people.
He became a doctor. He always wanted to help people. He obtained a medical degree. Absolutely, he did. He's never worked as a physician. Again, you know this, and some might say that's nitpicking. If you're going to run as Mr. Doctor Man, maybe you should have put in a little bit of the time. But anywho.
Got all those kids' glasses.
Eliminated medical debt. Poof. He buys us groceries every week. He knows what things cost.
Now
he buys us groceries every week. I love that. Because he's extremely wealthy, they have to say, oh, well, he buys us groceries every week. People don't like this. People don't like it when rich people try to say, I'm just like you. People would rather that rich people just say, hey, I'm rich. I get it. Now, again, this Abdul El-Sayed, an Egyptian American, and front runner right now, still kind of, sort of, maybe not. Who's kind of downplayed the Muslim Brotherhood and Egyptian terrorism, that kind of a thing. Well, it just so happens that, his parents are Egyptian. And again, he spent a lot of time not, with his super American, like salt of the earth Michiganders. But no, he's spent a lot of his time with the folks from Dearborn. And again, pushing anyone who doesn't like him is just, I guess, funded by the Jews. Just AIPAC and the Jews. if you don't like the Islamic guy who wants to push socialism, then you're Jewish, I guess. That's exciting. It's exciting. Again, I'm glad the fraud has come to the DNC. It warms my heart. I do love it. Now, before we end this evening here, I do want to give a shout out to our very fine friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom. Join adf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848 before we get to some of our last stuff here. So I'd like to take a moment here to talk, seriously, I said I'm very picky about my sponsors. The Alliance Defending Freedom spends more time than any other law organization that I know investing in free speech cases and going after the very guys like the Michigan people or the Colorado people that try to infringe on traditional American values. And they have done so consistently. When I reported on a story of a counselor in Indiana who refused to hide the details about gender transitions happening in South Madison School Corporation, and when the school was hiding mental illness information from the children's parents, the Alliance Defending Freedom, they swooped in and they represented her. And they fought for her until a settlement was reached. It was excellent work. And that's why they're a sponsor for me, is because I believe in the work they do. They're phenomenal. Right now, for the Alliance Defending Freedom, if you go to, again, joinadf.com/Tony, and again, choose to donate. I have donated myself personally. That's why I'm suggesting this. For a limited time, your very first gift to ADF is doubled by the special matching grant while funds last. I would appreciate if tonight, July 15th, if a few of y'all did this. I would. And again, why? Because I believe in the law firm, again, that is doing a phenomenal job as a legal group fighting on behalf of Americans. That's the Alliance Defending Freedom. Again, join adf.com/Tony or text Tony, Tony, to 83848. So last but certainly not least, on the other side of the legal stuff, because we'll have to talk about James Tallarico, we'll have to talk about the other nonsense. I wanted just a chance here in the bonus tonus section of the show to answer a couple of mail time questions that are not really going to be able to be saved until the next day. And, also, I just want the chance to kind of answer a few of these before we're done, because I don't want to leave too many of them out to dry. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Tony, you're not as collected tonight as you usually are. You're kind of stammering and bouncing around. Yeah, well, in all transparency, we don't really act around here. We don't really put on a show. What you see is what you get. And if the news is crazy and busy, we're going to be crazy and busy too. So there was a really kind super chat yesterday that I did not get a chance to thank for. First of all, Michelle McD gave a $20 super chat. It was very, very kind. Clank, clank, I'm a tank. Gave a $5 super chat. Very, very kind. And then there was a $50 super chat by Alaska Bill, which says, quote, "Hey, Tony, here we Alaskans really appreciate your show. Love your Trump impersonations. All kidding aside, keep the news flowing. We need more honest news broadcasts. Your dedication helps me digest the world news in real time." Really appreciate that. Thank you. You guys do not have to do that. This is very, very kind of you, though. All right, to some of the mail time questions, because we do have a few, and I want to get them answered. From Steve at 621 today. What are the odds we'll actually see Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche be confirmed right down party lines? I agree with your presupposition that I think Fetterman will likely break and vote alongside vote alongside Republicans to confirm him. I think probably John Cornyn will probably be pushed into it by the end. I'm not seeing any opposition from Thune here. So I think that Blanche will be pretty fine. From Kit Proch says, does every confirmation hearing end with the kind of loon wing in attendance turning into TDS theater? Every committee ever is just theater because there's cameras in there. It's one of the reasons why I am a strong advocate for keeping cameras, and I quote, the hell out of the Supreme Court of the United States. No, it shouldn't be theater. The more theater there is in this country, the more you're going to get people who just want to be on camera. Again, Abdul El-Sayed with a podcast. You've got, again, and I've pointed this out, one of the only congressmen that I think does a really good job of keeping kind of the business of Congress and the podcast separate is Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz will just straight up say, no, we're not doing the verdict for a while. I have work to do. They'll put it on hold. Some congressmen, though, live to be on camera. Look, if you want to do my job as the national correspondent here at the Daily Signal and then the host of the show, by all means do the podcast or the show or heaven knows. I'm the youngest guy in network broadcasting. I'm not joking. The two people closest to my age doing this are Caitlin Collins over at CNN, who is 2 or 3 years older than I am. I think she's still 33, maybe 34. And then the guy on the 5 over on Fox News, young man, who's also her age. So no one's going into the business. If you want to come do this, quit running for office. I know it's a financially lucrative thing to run for office, though. So, yeah. Anywho, from Kitty are we going to talk any more about like Biden's new memoir up for discussion? Not tonight, tomorrow. We're going to get into Biden's new exciting memoir a little bit later. From Cindy, have I heard any more on the president's use of the USPS to force states to hand over voter rolls and to put some limits on mail-in ballots and late ballots? So I believe that there are a couple of federal injunctions which are attempting to stop the United States Postal Service, but it's not clear as of yet in the appellate court whether they have the authority to do that nationwide, because the Supreme Court ruled you can't just do nationwide injunctions because you really feel like it. Additionally, there's a coalition of left-wing states suing to stop a merger between, is it like Skydance and Nexstar or Skydance and Warner Brothers? Nexstar and the CNN crew, meaning Warner Brothers, because CNN is owned by Warner Brothers. So that merger they're trying to stop also. It's going to be a lot of appellate court stuff. And that's kind of boring, but that's kind of the update. That's why we don't always give you up-to-date details, because appellate courts are boring. And also panel hearings are kind of retarded in the judicial. This is a question from yesterday that I absolutely did want to answer. Tony, I'm really curious, what's your continued reference regarding the Marines eating crayons? There was an old joke, a tale as old as time, in which Marines are considered to be jarheads and that they're all brawn, no brains, which is of course ridiculous. But like the song Yankee Doodle, Americans have a way of taking things that are supposed to make fun of them and turn them into aggressively pro-American things. Again, much to the consternation of Bruce Springsteen, despite a lot of his songs being anti-American, a lot of people play Bruce Springsteen songs as pro-American anthems. And by the way, same with Fortunate Son, for example. Is that Clearwater? Creedence Revival? Yeah, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I knew that. Why would I even have to second guess that? Those kind of things, Americans have a way of doing that, just taking it and saying, oh, you're meaning this to criticize us? Fine, we're going to double down on it. The Marines are the exact same way. They're like, oh, you're going to accuse us of being a bunch of crown-eating apes? We sure are apes. That's right. This is my favorite crayon to eat. And so it's become kind of an endearing joke that's not an insult. It's a way to say they are savage, and just a simple platoon of Marines would be more than happy to take each and every single island in Iran without breaking a sweat, and would love to bend Kalashnikovs over the foreheads of the Iranian regime carrying them. Again, a lot of Marines are still waiting and rubbing their hands together, appropriately so, after in the Iranian ordered Hezbollah killing of U.S. Marines back in, I think, 87. So it's an affectionate tease. In that, by the way, that's teasing is a measure of love. Insults or apathy are measures of insults in that side. A measure of dislike, not insults being a measure of insults. Man, I am tired today. From Indie Cards. So, hey, what's it actually going to take to end this conflict with Iran? Why hasn't Trump authorized it yet? The answer to what's it actually going to take, it's going to require the United States establishing some kind of a beachhead somewhere and just passing out rifles until the people rise up. It's going to require a couple of AGMs, a couple of missiles that have collateral damage. It is. It's going to be saying, okay, hey, IRGC, we know where your current leadership is. We know you're currently hiding with this family. If you don't want the family to die, leave and surrender. And if they say no, you send a missile through the house. Tony, that's terrible. You don't allow a bank robber to get away just because he's holding his family hostage. No. You go into the house and you get the bank robber. And there is also going to be a part of this that to actually fix it, the United States is going to have to fix it. Old Testament style warfare works. Winning a war works. Department of Defense and negotiation and soft-handed kind of pussyfooting has never won a war ever. by all means, please share with me one time in history in which a country restrained itself and pulled out some kind of huge diplomatically negotiated whatever. I'm serious. To this day, I've been looking for one. The closest you can kind of get is the Korean War, which was put on pause forever and still humiliates the United States because it allowed China to do a lot of awful things. Not to mention North Korea. That's the closest you can get. You say, well, we negotiated the end with Japan. Yeah, because we dropped 2 atomic bombs on them. We dropped the sun on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So again, I'm sorry, if you're going to suggest, here that, Tony, that's really like warmongery. I am a Teddy Rooseveltian imperialist. I, to my soul, believe, and I am not joking, the United States should have kept Cuba. It should have kept the Philippines. It should, and made them eventually territories that could elevate to statehood. Because where the United States has established ownership, rights have increased, the economy has increased, the proper cultures have set in. That is what I believe. Oh, that's really mean. Nope. And by the way, I say that as a child of a conquered tribe, a BIA card-carrying member of the not Elizabeth Warren kind, the actual Cherokee tribe. Yes, conquering is a good thing when it's done properly. So, that kind of thing's an aside. I just like to make it perfectly clear what it is here and there that that I fire away. So, last little question here. I want to make sure that I get a couple of others. I'm just having a little bit of fun. I know that it's not like really exciting network thing, kind of some bonus tonus here at the end. I thought there was one more question here. Maybe not. Oh, I asked producer Jen to put it over in the comments section. Let me pull it up here. It was a really good question. It was from Richard Lincoln. Here it is. With the latest drawdown of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve on July 10th, the reserve is at its lowest level since 1983. Well, we've built more storage since then, so that by percentage, no, not quite. Anywho, I know what you're saying, though. By percentage, sure. Isn't it time for some of the 10 tankers of oil seized from Venezuela to replenish it? So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve does not just replenish with crude oil. It replenishes with certain products, different kinds of oil from different parts of the world produce, different areas produce different kinds of oil. Sweet Texas tea is very different from natural gas produced in Louisiana, which is very different produced, like the very thick tar that came out of Venezuela. The kind of oil from Venezuela is really great for asphalt, really great for some kinds of fertilizer. Again, the some is the really important part there. Different parts of the world produce different kinds of oil. And so, again, I think that seizing Iranian oil vessels would be the thing to do. But unfortunately, when we opened the strait during the MOU, that would have been the time to seize a lot of the oil. But there were parties that wanted to fly to Switzerland and do some photo ops and negotiations. So missed opportunities are annoying. Now those boats are currently off the coast of China. That's the honest answer. Again, if you don't like it, sorry. This is why I also don't think that here in the United States, that like the whole, J.D. Vance is kind of a comms op. I no longer believe that. Now, again, I still really think that the vice president's done some phenomenal work on investigating and going after fraud. Again, the president of the United States and Vance are very clear that ICE needs to continue doing the road stoppage. By the way, I should mention that Maine guy who everyone was supposed to be crying about, federal investigators announced today that he had a bunch of meth in his car. So whoops. Exciting times. Exciting times indeed. So, all right. Those things, I think, will end it for this evening. I do. I think we've done a really good show or a mediocre show. Hey, we did a show. So you guys take care. We'll be back tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, for more news, nonsense, and shenanigans. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.